All right, so first things first, how are you?
Great. Yeah, really well.
I was just told by you of this little fact that you have some Dutch heritage in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad is Dutch. He was born in Woerden, and he moved to Canada when he was 3 years old. And he speaks Dutch,
Okay.
and I don't speak Dutch.
Well, that's about the extent I'll ask about that. But what I find interesting, then, what kind of music was played as you were growing up?
My dad had great taste in music. He introduced us to the Pixies and the Violent Femmes, Tom Waits,
Okay.
who turns 73 today. And my mom was really into jazz and the Beatles. So yeah, great music. And my older brother, he loved the Beastie Boys and Metallica and Led Zeppelin and metal bands like Ministry
Okay.
and yeah, Pantera. So like a really wide range.
So when you came of age, kind of early teens, when a person starts to form their own identity, what struck you? What were you gravitating towards musically?
I think the Pixies was the biggest influence. It's a music that just feels so cool, effortlessly, and so unique and original and catchy but strange, which is a quality that I really gravitate towards. When something's weird, but it's still melodic.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because obviously that captures kind of the type of music that you guys make quite well. So when did that first become apparent? When did you started putting thoughts onto paper or kind of structuring the first kind of songs?
I dabbled a bit in my teens in songwriting, but I was more interested in guitar playing, becoming quick and virtuosic, I suppose, was my interest.
Okay.
And that caused me to go to jazz school when I was 20. But it was in jazz school when I was studying all this cerebral stuff that I discovered songwriting in a new way. Maybe because it was refreshing. It was like an escape from all of the intellectual musicality. And I didn't really sing, but I sang my song, and it felt better than practicing scales. It felt more meaningful to write a song with words and a story. It felt like a more full encapsulation of the soul's truth than just playing guitar. And so from that moment, I quit school and then started writing songs, and the whole path changed. It's like, I must write songs. I must learn to sing, because no one else is going to sing them. Must start a band and share these songs.
Does some of that musical education, very formal musical education, I get totally why you kind of went to do something else, because I would assume something like studying jazz is quite rigid, where the type of music that you make is very, as you mentioned, catchy but strange in a sense as well. But does any of your kind of the techniques that you learned, does that come back in the music still or no?
Absolutely, yeah. I think like widening your vocabulary, whether that's in language or in music, helps you speak more fully, more eloquently, and it really matters what you have to say. And so some people believe that learning music theory, it robs you of your originality, but I disagree. I think if you're original, you're going to be original with or without school, but vocabulary helps you to speak originally with more words, with more colors. And so it helped me a lot in songwriting, because I was able to, you could take a major chord and a minor chord, and then I knew how to put a strange diminished or augmented chord in between those two chords without thinking. And so I think that lent itself to why Mother Mother was interesting at the beginning, because there was all these like jazz chords and chromaticisms and strange harmony.
Sure.
And I think that's what made us stand out.
Is some of this might be I don't know. I'm not musically versed enough to know if this is a good question or not. But is that kind of perhaps what still entices people to the type of music? Because you have a whole resurgence of the of kind of the first couple of albums. Is that because of the music is solid in a sense that there is, as you mentioned, that you kind of had to know how to make something interesting?
I think, you know, right now in modern culture, I think what people are craving is something that's different and surprising, because when we were young, music was more a certain way and needed to sound a certain way to be on the radio, and there was people standing at the gates kind of like letting a certain type of music pass. But now the internet is like anarchy, and I think young people are thirsty for something that's delightfully shocking and different, because the world is different and youth culture is different and unconventional and not fitting tidily into categories, binary or otherwise. And so I think the reason why our early music is connecting to these young people is because they probably maybe even just subconsciously connect to it being different, because they're different than the generations that have come before them.
From a personal perspective, then, how do you relate to those early couple of albums? Because obviously you weren't the same person back then as you are now. So how do you see those early albums, and especially thematically and kind of the mindset that you were in at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have such a fondness for the early music, and almost like a reverence, because my belief structure around creativity is that it's a bit of a force or an energy that exists around us just as much as it exists within us. And for whatever reason, we have certain chapters of our life where we're open to that energy, and it comes through really easily, and then it comes back out beautifully. And when I listen back, I hear that. And I don't know if it's just because I was like a 20-year-old discovering the world, or I was learning all these jazz chords, or I was writing songs for the first time, and it all just kind of came together to create a wide open passage where songs just, like I don't remember writing them, I just remember them appearing, like those first two records. And so now it's like, I can't even say I'm a better songwriter, because it's harder.
Yeah, I would imagine when you're conscious, especially when you're young, you're not very conscious of what you're doing at the time, and especially early on in your career. And now you're very conscious, I suppose, of the craft that you're in.
Yeah, it's like naivety is so useful in creativity, because like if you don't know what you're not supposed to do, then you're gonna do it, and then you're gonna be courageous for doing it, because you're breaking the rules. And that's the whole, that is what's at the foundation of innovation, is doing what you're not supposed to do. And so when you become educated, you almost need to unlearn. You need to remember to forget what you know in order to return to that kind of like childlike naivety.
Is that difficult to do? Because I can imagine once you rely on this music thing for a living, then certain other elements come in as well. So how do you kind of separate the job from the joy of it?
Well, I think it is hard. It's the hardest thing to do, to stay in a state of awe in life, And I think that's what you need to do in order for the creative relationship to stay passionate, just like with someone that you're together with. You need to rekindle the spark of life, and so you do that by being present, by waking up every day and choosing to see the beauty, the miracle, the wonder, the magic. And it's a practice. And despite getting used to yourself and getting used to yourself in the world, which can often equate to becoming cynical and jaded and in the tunnel of your identity. You have to push against that and stay young and just stay wide-eyed in every aspect of life. And if you do that, I find songwriting becomes more free of the thinking.
And this resurgence of, because obviously you couldn't envision social media kind of coming in and having such an impact on the not on the music, but the spreading of your music, I suppose. So how do you perceive kind of this new world that we're in, where there used to be an old way to be in the music business, and now there's this new way of, as you mentioned, kind of. I walked past the venue just now, and there's already people waiting outside. So this new kind of way of reaching people, and people all over the world, all different walks of life. So how do you perceive that kind of element of what you do?
Well, I think I and we in the band will, of course, see the modern way as wonderful because it has so benefited us inexplicably. It's so mysterious how Mother somehow found the portal of exposure through TikTok. You can't really trace it.
Sure.
And for that reason, the modern realm of social media is sort of magical and really positive to us. But I respect that there's also like a dark side, right, to social media and so much information being out there, and how that can congest and dilute and create a really hard battleground for emerging artists. But so I respect that, but I also just think it's ultimately for the better that
Sure.
music is allowed to be free, and music is allowed to be chosen by the audience, by the consumer, without people choosing for them, such as people at radio stations.
Sure.
Or marketing teams. So much of the big marketing success happens accidentally online by kids gravitating to what they decide they like. And I think that's ultimately for the better.
But also, what you mentioned is interesting, because do you feel then, and I believe Inside was mostly made before the whole pandemic and everything, and kind of the band kind of got that attention.
Well, Inside was written when we didn't know.
Right.
During the pandemic. So January of 2020, I started writing, and then wrote through the beginning of the pandemic. And then once we started bringing the songs to life in the studio, still in the pandemic, that's when we started to discover the TikTok. So it was after
Right.
we wrote it.
Because I can imagine, would you feel more responsibility or a sense of responsibility, just mentioning kind of the effects of social media on our society, but also kind of the audience getting perhaps a little bit younger?
I think, I believe everything happens the way it's supposed to. And I'm so grateful that I didn't know about the TikTok stuff, about the young kids, while I was writing Inside. Because I feel like that album needed to be unfettered of everything but the moment. Because we were like in this really grim, fragile, sensitive space as a world. Pandemic.
Sure.
So much heartache, so much struggle, and I think the writing needed to tune into that and nothing else, and it did. And as a byproduct, it was an album that dealt with the issues in the moment. So I think if I did know about the new wave of success that was coming in, that would have interfered. I do believe so.
Sure.
And now it's different. Now I'm quite thankful to be cognizant of this audience as I write now. It's actually helping.
Okay.
Because they basically said, do anything you want. In fact, the more weird, the more strange, the more surprising, the better. And as a creative person, that's what you want to be told. Usually it's the other way around. Usually there's someone in the business side who's saying, you know, don't go too far. You know, just, you know, tighten it up. But these kids are saying the opposite. And so that's granting us, you know, this beautiful permission to be free and to be curious and to be young and naive and bold and daring in the songwriting process. And I believe that that is really benefiting the music that's being written and the album that is to come.
How far along are you with the new album?
Pretty far, like it really looks clear.
Okay.
And there's, you know, there's over 10 songs and
Okay.
a title and a theme and you know, track 1 and the last track. You know, those things to me really tell you when an album is finding itself. When you have like the thematic thread and like you could hear how the album starts. Like you can imagine someone putting the record on or even pressing play on their phone and the first sounds of the record. To me, I love that part of the conceptualization. And
obviously Inside was very much, as you mentioned, kind of this purge album. You had to get it out because it was very much that time. So where was your mindset as and then you don't have to feel too much about the thematic elements on the new stuff, on the new songs, but where was your mind at? Did you kind of notice, because you also said you gravitate towards more sinister music and those kind of things?
Yeah.
Was it perhaps more positive and more lighthearted in a way?
This new stuff?
The new stuff, or is it in a similar vein still? Will you always gravitate towards the kind of more sinister elements of human nature?
Well, I think that for whatever reason, I love the sinister, I love the cynical and the cheeky nature of storytelling. But I feel like there needs to be its opposite somewhere present. You know, if you're gonna be dark, lightness needs to have a role in that story. And right now, these songs that are coming forward, it's all about death.
Okay.
And to me, it's not so much bleak or grim. It's like death as a symbol of life. Death as a reminder to live. Because I think that's like what death's ultimate purpose is to help us live more fully.
Well, I listened to a lot of lectures by a guy called Alan Watts, and he's a Zen guy, and he talks about that a lot, about not being able to enjoy the world if there's no evil and all that kind of stuff.
That's it. I think even the word paradox itself is paradoxical, because everything needs its opposite in order to be itself, in order to have a context. And so, yeah, death, I think, you know, culturally we perceive it incorrectly. You know, we put too much sadness and fear in whereas it should be the thing that we really think about often and connect to help us live more presently and celebratorily.
Well, it's definitely a subject that is very interesting and worth exploring. So it's going to be interesting to see what you've come up with.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to talk about is Christmas. Do you like Christmas?
I don't have a lot of strong feelings. I think that the idea of people coming together and rejoicing at the end of a year and sharing in conversation and food and tradition is lovely. But I think, you know, we as a society have set Christmas up to fail a little bit. There's a lot of pressure to buy, which creates debt, which creates stress for the beginning of the year. Like, that seems too bad. And then people probably eat too much and drink too much, and probably makes their bodies feel a bit agitated. And then you put them with their family, who, you know, usually are the people that trigger you. So you don't feel too good, you're spending too much money, and then your mom and your dad and your aunts and your uncles, they're kind of making your psyche trigger, all that together. You know, it's no surprise why people have a hard time at Christmas.
No, the reason obviously I ask is you have a song called "Cry Christmas,"
Yeah.
and one of my favorite kind of Christmassy songs is the Pogues one.
Yeah, it's the best one.
Fairy Tale of New York.
Fairy Tale is the best Christmas song.
But that's kind of a similar sentiment where it's more realistic. It's a little bit bleak, but that's the reality for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
was that kind of the intention with that song?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's too many Christmas songs that paint an unrealistic picture. And you think about all the people that have a hard time at this time of year, it's almost like an insult for them to have to hear that music, which is so impossibly positive. And so I think, yeah, we wanted to honor the people that struggle during this time of year with a song that speaks candidly about, you know, struggling at Christmas.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, enjoy tonight. We're at the Prioritiza now, and you're playing later on in a couple hours. So I hope you have a lot of fun. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you so much for the chat. I loved it. Thank you.